What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, May 23rd, 2018, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and another crazy weekend. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room. And before I get into the news, I just saw this across the Fox News feed, and it's so bizarre I have to share it with you. The post office is now issuing scratch and sniff postage stamps. Apparently, you stick them on a letter and then you scratch them, and there you get these aromas of things like chocolate and watermelon. And I don't know, that just strikes me as rather gratuitous and bizarre. Borderline decadent, I guess is a good word for it. Okay, so getting into the serious news here. We are still seeing the global outrage in response to the Bloody Monday massacre down in Gaza. And more Israelis are speaking out about it and saying, where is the outrage? This is just so far beyond the excuse of self-defense that it's making Israel look bad, obviously. It's making the world's Jewish people look bad by extension, because Israel likes to claim they represent all of the Jews in the world. And here in the United States, American Jews, they're pulling back. They don't want to be tarnished by this at all. And so we're seeing more and more articles written by Israelis saying, what is going on here? Why the indifference here? One article said that, at least to some people, apparently killing Palestinians is less important than killing mosquitoes. But people are now really speaking out. The corporate media, of course, is trying to do its job of providing cover, blaming the victims, and say, you know, they deserved it. They were throwing rocks. They were being unruly on their side of the fence. Again, the media is using language that makes it look like there was a threat on both sides, that there was a clash on both sides. It wasn't. It was Israeli snipers in fortified positions 100 meters from the fence just shooting at people. And we're starting to get detailed numbers of the injured. Apparently, 500 of the Palestinians were actually shot in the head. So that's an intended kill shot right there. Now, the European Union is calling on Israel to reinstate the visa for the head of Human Rights Watch office in Gaza, Omar Shakir. His visa was revoked after Israel accused him of supporting the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. But the EU notes that if the visa is not reinstated, Israel would join a very short list of countries which have barred Human Rights Watch staff. And that's another stigma that Israel will probably ignore. Now, the United States is considering punitive steps against Palestinian diplomats in response to the threat to take Israel to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. And the U.S. is out there saying that this is a bad move. The U.S. continues to believe that direct negotiations between the two parties are the only way to achieve a comprehensive and lasting peace. Involving the ICC does not get us closer to peace. Well, neither does gunning down innocent protesters. Israel doesn't want peace. They want the land. And once again, the U.S. government has shown itself to be Israel's sock puppet. Israel does not want to be taken to the ICC, so they sick the United States on the Palestinian diplomats. Israel has upped the ante, so to speak. They launched a major attack into Gaza City involving Israeli warplanes and artillery. One Gaza resident, Mohammed Abu Assis, on Twitter was saying Israeli aircraft are bombing several locations in Gaza. Also, the rockets were targeted mainly at the Gaza seaport. He went on to say continuous explosions west of Gaza City shake the sky in flames in different areas, a very heavy flight of Israeli warplanes. Israel basically shelled central Gaza, and their claim here is that they did all of this in response to some Palestinian kids sneaking through the fence and setting fire to an army tent, and then sneaking back. Now, that last part I'm very dubious. I mean, makes it sound like the IDF just aren't paying attention. You know, they got a burning tent here, kids are running away, nothing happens to them. And the reason I think that this may have been a false flag, this burning of the army tent, is because when the Israeli Air Force hit the seaport, they hit the fishing seaport, and they were targeting the boats, and they hit a boat that's getting ready to sail out to meet the aid flotilla, trying to get through the blockade of Gaza imposed by Israel. And the boat was set on fire by the Israeli attack, and it was due to sail to meet the flotilla on its way to Gaza. Now, there's been a number of these aid flotillas that have attempted to breach the Israeli naval blockade in Gaza in recent years. All they carry is food, medicine, coloring books for kids. Nothing that can be construed as a weapon, but Israel always meets them and turns them back. The most notorious such incident happened in 2010 when Israeli commandos killed 9 activists on board the ship Mavi Marmara. Now, we're going to do a shout out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Little bit of a diplomatic whoopsie. Apparently, while celebrating at the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, was photographed posing with a picture of Jerusalem in which a Jewish temple stands in place of Al-Aqsa Mosque. And this photo, of course, made all the Israeli media, a very symbolic way of saying the U.S. backs Israel's building of the third temple. Friedman may not have known that the photo had been altered. It was just handed to him and he posed for the photo. And the U.S. Embassy has demanded an apology for allowing one of their staff to present this controversial image to the ambassador. The U.S. policy is absolutely clear. We support the status quo on the Haram al-Sharif Temple Mount, the statement concluded. But, you know, Israel's just trying to get all these symbols out there that the U.S. blesses their taking over the Temple Mount, even though that's not official U.S. policy. At least not yet. The Israeli occupation forces have issued more demolition orders for the residential and agriculture areas in Yada, south of Hebron, including a medical clinic belonging to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. And the usual excuse is that all of these buildings were built without an Israeli permit. Well, some of the buildings actually date back before Israel even existed. And Israel has a habit of just not issuing building permits in the West Bank. Now, the area is inhabited by a group of Palestinian farmers who depend on agriculture and sheep herding. The area is constantly under attack by Jewish settlers, and there have been numerous attempts to seize their land, and this looks like the start of another one. But again, Israel may have overreached itself because 76 members of Congress have co-signed a letter to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urging him to end the demolitions and evictions of Palestinians in the West Bank. And according to J Street, the letter notes that the destruction and displacement of these communities pose a serious threat to the human rights of Palestinians, to the prospects for a two-state solution, and to Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state. Well, Israel doesn't want a two-state solution. They want it all. They've made that very clear from the beginning. If you look at the maps of Israel and Palestine since Israel's founding, it's Israel constantly grabbing more and more and more land. It's Israel that's trying to wipe Palestine off the map. Meanwhile, over in France, there are demands to cancel the France-Israel season, which is a series of hundreds of cultural events backed by both governments that is supposed to start next month. And the French people are out there saying, no, we don't want this. They're very angry about what happened. More than 10,000 people have signed a petition urging President Macron to cancel the France-Israel season altogether. So Israel has really created a public relations nightmare for itself. Apparently, Brazilian music legend Gilberto Gil is pulling the plug on a planned performance in Tel Aviv, and Palestinians are applauding that. And apparently dozens of artists are declaring their support for the cultural boycott of Israel following the latest Israeli mass killings of civilians in the occupied Gaza Strip. They include bands such as Portishead, Wolf Alice, and Slaves. This is not going to go away anytime soon. Anytime soon. Netanyahu has now ordered the security cabinet to meet at an underground bunker until further notice for security purposes. The order given amid increasing tensions with Iran, and also to make it more difficult for surveillance to get in there and find out what they're talking about. But who's ramping up the tensions in the region? The U.S. and Israel. An article over in Russia Today sums it up rather beautifully. Iran is in the crosshairs as the empire enters its mad dog days. And that does seem to be what's happening with the U.S. government. Gone is any pretense at diplomacy or negotiation. It's all bluster and bullying and threats and arm twisting. Another article from news@antiwar.com. Trump's plan B with Iran basically is setting the stage for war. You've got Mike Pompeo out there with this list of 12 very broad demands that Iran is never going to agree to. And so basically they're going to say, well, yeah, then we have to go to war. Iran won't do what we tell it to do. That's the new justification for going to war with a country. Now, Mike Pompeo is out there claiming that Iran is carrying out assassination operations in Europe. And he made that statement at a public forum and was immediately greeted with skepticism from security experts and Iranian exiles who say they're not aware of any evidence to back up this allegation, but it's just part of the demonization of Iran preparatory to yet another war. Now, if you want to know who's doing assassinations out there, we find that out from this report in Sputnik News, where apparently the U.S. has greenlit an Israeli plan to assassinate a top Iranian general. And apparently 3 years ago, the U.S. apparently helped botch an Israeli plan to kill this general. And now Washington is saying it wishes it hadn't tipped off the Iranians. So they're going after General Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's overseas arm, the Quds Force. So, according to Max Blumenthal, and this is no surprise to anybody, the Israel lobby is calling the shots in Trump's rollback policy on Iran. Israel didn't like the P5+1 deal. It got in the way of ginning for war, or gunning for war. And so Trump has now pulled out of the P5+1. They're threatening economic sanctions all over Europe if they don't pull out of the Iran deal. Pompeo's out there with that list of 12 impossible to fulfill demands. That's it. That's setting the stage for the war with Iran. And this one is likely to bring us into direct conflict with the Russians. Because Russia's not going to let the globe be gobbled up right to their borders. They learned a very painful lesson in World War II when the Nazis got very close to Moscow before they got pushed back. They're not going to let that happen again. Now, one thing possibly diffusing the situation, or at least removing one item of propaganda from Israel, is Hezbollah is now starting to pull out of South Syria, and the area that they took back from the U.S.-backed jihadis is being turned over to the control of the Syrian army. And apparently the Hezbollah is now heading to the area controlled north of the province and toward the capital, Damascus. Now, Israel wants Hezbollah totally out of Syria. They want Russia totally out of Syria. They want Iran totally out of Syria. They want to go back to where Syria is unable to defend itself against all these attacks. Meanwhile, the Syrian government has announced that the capital city is fully under their control. Daesh has been ousted. So Assad basically has won this. There's still mop-up operations going on, unless, of course, there is a false flag gas attack and the U.S. launches another major war, which I would say at this point is likely. ISIS has now counterattacked near Palmyra, and it's their biggest attack in the past few months. They've attacked positions of the Syrian Arab Army near the T3 pumping station. They're trying to get back in control of that oil infrastructure because they use that oil to raise money for their operation. These are probably the biggest ISIS attacks on government positions since the formal defeat of ISIS in the Euphrates Valley. But the ISIS units in the Homs, Deir ez-Zor Desert are still a notable security threat. But it's mop-up operations. Now Israel, once again showing to the world the meaning of chutzpah, has come on out and warned Damascus not to use air defenses against Israeli jets flying inside Syria. I guess Israel is getting very bold. Lebanon is complaining to the United Nations that Israel flies into their country and throws pot shots at Syria from their territory. So now apparently Israel is planning to actually invade Syria's airspace, and they're warning Damascus, don't shoot back at us. If you shoot back at us, you know, we're going to destroy your defenses. And Israel said, all batteries that fire on Israeli aircraft will be destroyed. All batteries that do not fire on us will not be destroyed, saying this is a permanent policy. That is a lot of chutzpah. I mean, Israel is committing acts of war against Syria right now. And Syria has every right to defend itself from these acts of war. When you take military hardware into somebody else's country without permission, technically that's an act of war. Now, I want to reiterate one more time that when clearing out some of these militant strongholds, they're finding American weapons, Israeli weapons, British weapons, NATO weapons. And now they found a warehouse full of the equipment associated with chemical weapons attacks. So we know the materials are inside Syria to launch a chemical weapon attack and try and blame it on Assad. But again, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a reason for Assad to do something that's stupid. He's already winning the war. ISIS is collapsing. The militants are being driven on out. He has no reason to use a chemical weapon, especially knowing that that would be the one thing that would give the U.S. an excuse to come on back in and re-escalate the war. Over in Great Britain, we're finally starting to hear from the Skripals, and Yulia Skripal gave an interview, and the Russian embassy is a little concerned. First of all, looks like there's a tracheotomy scar on her neck. But Moscow is still concerned that even though she's given this interview, the language she used in the interview suggested she had been primed and coached and told what to say. The British government is still not allowing anybody from the Russian embassy or the Skripal family to have direct contact with Yulia Skripal. And the embassy, needless to say, is very, very concerned about that. Getting on back to Palestine, they've officially joined the Chemical Weapons Convention, and the state of Palestine, they're out there acting like a government. Hamas is acting like a government. They're joining all these international organizations, and that's a very, very good thing. Up in Afghanistan, the Afghan people are questioning the value of the United States forces in the fight against the Taliban. And the Pentagon watchdog is admitting, well, there's been a lack of progress. Now remember, Afghanistan is known as the graveyard where empires go to die. Britain certainly learned that. The Soviet Union learned that. Now the U.S. is learning that. But those U.S. forces in Afghanistan are less concerned about going after the Taliban and more concerned about guarding all those opium fields and that pipeline right of way. That may have something to do with it. We have to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here. And turning toward Korea, as the summit approaches, we hope, North Korean media is returning back to the angry and confrontational tone. Boy, can you just think back a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, it looked like Korea was on their way to reunification. Everything was going to work on out. There was going to be peace in the land. And then you get John Bolton out there screaming at North Korea. You get the military exercises, the nuclear bombers flying along the border. The one thing North Korea said, don't do, or this is all off. And now we're back to square one. We're back to where the war hawks want us, getting ready to invade North Korea. And considering how badly we did in the original Korean War, or the start of, it's still technically ongoing Korean War, that's really not a good idea. The U.S. doesn't really do very well in jungle environments, such as Vietnam. They're really good in desert territory, where they can see the enemy. They don't do well in jungle action. And the forecasts are that a war on the North Korean peninsula could cost 500,000 lives. So whether or not the summit is going to happen or not is up in the air. The latest word out of Washington, D.C. is that Trump may just pull on out unless there's a good deal on the table. In other words, they've gone back to this idea of saying, you give us everything we want first, then we'll talk and see what we're going to do for you. And Mike Pompeo is out there saying that a bad deal is not an option for the United States. He's out there saying the American people are counting on us to get this right. No, we are not. I think what most Americans are counting on the government to do is to stop mucking about in other people's countries and start fixing all the problems with this one. Because this country does have problems. Anybody with eyes can see it. And more foreign wars is not going to fix this place. Now, Trump has hurled yet another insult at China. They have uninvited China from the RIMPAC exercise, which happens here around Hawaii every 2 years. It's going to be coming up here this summer. And that's where all these different countries from around the Pacific Rim come together and they have joint military exercises. And China has usually been a participant and a very present one. And Trump has now said, nope, you're not invited to the party. Now, that is going to be seen as a hideous insult by Xi Jinping. But again, it's just reinforcing this image of the U.S. government to the rest of the world as just being this bully. That there's no way to work with the United States anymore. It's do as you're told or else. Down in Venezuela, Maduro is rejecting Trump's sanctions. And of course, we reported yesterday they kicked out the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador, for supposedly conspiring to bring down the government, which the U.S. has been trying to do going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. And they actually succeeded with Chavez. He got booted out of power for a grand total of 8 days. Then there was a counter coup and a popular uprising that put him back in. So we keep hearing this expression about restoring democracy to Venezuela. Well, they just had elections. Maduro won. The U.S. is angry that the guy they backed, the opposition, lost, and rather badly. And what they mean when they say we're going to restore democracy means they're going to go on in, take out the existing government, and put in a puppet. Like they did in Iran in 1953, like they did in Chile in 1973, and on and on and on and on. Some 50 of these attempts since the end of World War II, succeeding about half the time. I have for a long while been talking about the decline in American manufacturing. And in between the media snippets about how the economy is recovering and everything's fine, and all you have to do is look at the stock market to see that, we can see with our own eyes all these shuttered factories just corroding, rusting away. And this is going to have an impact on America's ability to fight a war against a peer like Russia or China. You have to go back to the history of World War II and realize that when the U.S. got into the war, when it really started to crank up after Pearl Harbor, how they got on a war footing is they took the existing manufacturing companies and said, you need to retool a little bit so that instead of pickup trucks, you can make Army Jeeps. Or instead of passenger planes, you can make warplanes. Or instead of thermos bottles, you can make artillery shells. they had to have factories that could be quickly and easily converted to war materiel. We don't have those. And so not too surprisingly, we're seeing this article out of Defense News. The United States is running out of bombs, and it may be a struggle to make more. And this is coming on top of concerns that right now a lot of our military supplies come from foreign sources, which would be cut off in the event of a major war. So we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Finishing up with China. Do you remember back in 2016 and 2017, there were accusations that those evil Cubans were using a sonic weapon on our diplomatic staff? And nothing was ever proved, but it was basically part of the run-up to the souring of relations with Cuba, which had been one of the few things the Obama administration did that I agreed with. And now they're trying to make the same claim about China, that U.S. embassies in China are being attacked with a sonic weapon. And one of their workers has suffered brain damage. He's being brought home for assessment and so forth and so on. So again, they're recycling the same propaganda over and over. Turning to the domestic political scene here, James Comey is out there on the warpath against Donald Trump, and he was responding to Trump's recent tweets about how there may be prosecutions coming following the Inspector General report. And Comey basically came out and tweeted, "Our country is led by those who will lie about anything." And Comey attempted to justify the FBI's use of a spy inside the Trump campaign, which he refers to as a confidential human source, because spy has such a negative connotation on it. And according to Comey, human sources are tightly regulated and essential to protecting the country. Protecting the country from what? A political campaign? This is totally unjustified. But I'm beginning to smell panic inside the Beltway. And I'm hearing unconfirmed reports that more and more officials are approaching the Justice Department to make a deal before it all breaks loose. Now, Devin Nunes appeared on Maria Bartiromo's program and blasted the FBI for putting a spy into the Trump campaign and trying to entrap them into collusion. There was no collusion going on. The FBI was trying to basically manufacture it out of thin air. And the House Intelligence Chairman said this is definitely a red line. And if it was proven that the spy paid Trump associates to implant himself in the campaign, this is way over the line. It is over the line. When it happened to Carter, it was over the line. When Nixon did it to the Democrats, it was over the line. This is over the line. It's time for some resignations or some firings or some jail sentences. Knowing Washington, D.C., even if these people are found guilty, they'll be sentenced to stand in the corner for an hour and not think about polar bears or some other wrist slap like that. Now, Michael Caputo has come on out. Apparently, his lawyer cleared him to say a few more things and said there was a second campaign spy inside the Trump campaign from the National Security Agency. And apparently, this source from the NSA offered to turn over copies of all of Hillary's emails to the campaign. Caputo rejected the offer because that was likely a setup to say the Trump campaign illegally obtained the emails. So he made the right call on that one. But yeah, the deep, boy, these guys play dirty, don't they? Now remember, the NSA officially offered the emails to James Comey when he was still head of the FBI. That would have been a legal release of the information in an ongoing investigation. Comey turned them down, wasn't interested, didn't want to see it. Now, Caputo, when he was dealing with this NSA spy, he went and reported this inappropriate contact to the House and Senate Intelligence Committees and the Mueller team. And nobody followed up. Caputo is saying the Mueller team didn't seem to care about the alleged informants in the Trump campaign. So Mueller has an assistant, Andrew Weissman. They call him the Pit Bull. And it turns out he's got a very dark past. He was previously busted for withholding evidence in a previous case. So this is a lawyer who is not in there for justice and finding out the truth. This is a hatchet man to go on in and get somebody convicted even if they're innocent. The perfect man to be on Mueller's team. So anyway, getting on down here. Strange, no phone calls yet. And of course, the corporate media is still on their anti-Trump crusade. The corporate media hates Donald Trump. The president hates them back on Twitter. And it's time to start evaluating just how all this partisanship and rancor has distorted the corporate media to the point where most people don't trust it anymore. It's seen as biased, unreliable, propagandistic. And their audience numbers, viewership numbers, readership numbers are all showing it. People are turning away from the corporate media because they want to go someplace where they can just see the facts presented and decide for themselves, not just have a lot of rhetoric thrown at them. Now, in the next week or so, we're probably going to see dueling polls here because Reuters just had a poll and Republicans have taken the lead looking into the midterm elections this November. And the Democrats promptly came on out with another poll saying, no, we're still 2 points ahead. Over at the White House, Trump has ordered a house cleaning to try and stop the leaks. The place leaks worse than a colander. And it looks like there are just going to be a lot of firings. They don't know who the leak is. They're just going to start replacing staff en masse. So apparently Trump has ordered Chief of Staff John Kelly to initiate the culling. And that's hoping that Kelly himself isn't the leak. But it is a very disloyal thing to do, to be entrusted into the White House, into a position like that, and then start peddling information all over in exchange for, what, free drinks, women, drugs, kids, who knows what's going on out there. But we are seeing the corporate media starting to backpedal on Russiagate. It's starting to sink on in that there is no there. And we're getting this chorus from the media saying it's not the fault of the FBI that the investigation has dragged on with nothing to show for it. It's not the fault of Mueller either. It's not the fault of the corporate media, even though all they've done for the last 2 years is scream about Russia. You know, it's just how the system works. If anything, the inquiry should have been better funded and had more authority. But overall, they're starting to pull on back and distance themselves. Because when the Mueller investigation, as it has already done, comes up empty, the corporate media is going to look rather silly for having been out there for 2 years screaming, yes, any day now, Mueller's going to find something. We're going to impeach that guy at the White House. We're going to get rid of President Orange. And now they're starting to basically make excuses for why nothing happened. It's just the way the system works. Just the way the system works. You know, there were grounds to suspect Trump-Russia collusion. You want to look at collusion, look at the Uranium One deal. Corporate media doesn't talk about that, do they? It's another reason why people don't trust the corporate media any longer. We know there are important stories out there that corporate media will not touch. GMO safety, vaccine safety, all kinds of things like that. Now, the other day, we were having a little bit of fun poking at Nancy Pelosi for trying to defend the MS-13 gang from Donald Trump's remarks calling them animals. And if you read the history of some of their crimes, you can see that the appellation actually fits. But the liberals have gone crazy saying it's racist, it's insensitive, it's not inclusive, blah, 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 blah. And now the Southern Poverty Law Center has waded into the debate, slamming Donald Trump's MS-13 remarks, saying it's unacceptable to use the racist and dehumanizing language. Well, animal isn't racist. It doesn't point in any particular direction. And MS-13 dehumanizes themselves. I think they're trying to protect MS-13 because that is the growing and very visible face of the open borders policy. And just like in countries in Europe where when they report rapes, they don't report the ethnicity of the perpetrator anymore, we're starting to see this effort here to sort of gloss over MS-13 because we've got to keep those borders open. We've got to keep those illegals coming on in. Just got to keep the globalization machine going. And yes, MS-13 are very, very bad. And many of them are illegal immigrants. Others are local recruits. But it is an imported gang. They came from Central America. And they make the Crips and the Bloods look like choir boys. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now. Art from Off the Grid, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Interesting. I'm sitting and listening to these interviews with Comey and Clapper and, just trying to see what I can find that can maybe flip the tables on these clowns. And, well, lo and behold, we've got it. During an interview, separate interviews, both Comey and Clapper said the same thing. Said it slightly different, but they both said the same thing.
Yes.
That they're, because they're looking for some kind of Russian collusion, between the Trump campaign and Russia and trying to stack the election in favor of Trump and this, that, and the other. But then recently we have Clapper's the one that really comes to mind when he's being asked on The View about this whole spying thing. And, well, I don't like really using the word spying, but we weren't necessarily spying on Trump. What we were doing was we were trying to keep tabs on what Russia was doing to protect the Trump campaign from any kind of interference on into our election system and whatever. And okay, you were trying to stop. Let me see if I get this straight now. You're trying to keep Russia in check so they don't interfere in the election process, but the only one that you were protecting was Trump. You didn't make no effort to protect the Clinton campaign, only the Trump campaign. And then we end up with hacked emails and such as that through the on the Clinton side. So in essence, what you did was you helped Trump get elected, is what you did. This is how this is breaking down. It sounds almost like they helped Trump when, they're trying to claim they're looking for collusion between Trump and Russia. But yet, if you were really concerned with Russia interfering in the elections, why wouldn't you have offered the same kind of protection to the Clinton campaign?
That's an excellent point. That's an absolutely good analysis.
And when I heard Clapper say this, I'm like, dude, really? Do you realize what you just said? You just basically said, we helped Trump win. Oops.
Yeah. The lies are getting thinner and thinner and thinner and easier to see through. So good catch on that one.
All right, man. Thanks. Have a great one.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, did you happen to catch the video they released of the four below?
Yes, I did. It's posted to whatreallyhappened.com.
Impressive, ain't it?
Yes, it is.
As deadly as they are. Not so much for the people saying, "Oh, they got a rust bucket. They're all rusted stuff." That was 20 years ago. It's just 2018.
Yes.
Hey, Mike. I wanted to talk about the oil prices. Now, what do they call it? The tar sands in Canada. That takes like energy to get to get oil out of the tar sands, right? Like so.
Yeah, well, it takes energy to get oil out of anywhere.
Is it harder though to get it out of the tar sand? I mean, they have to heat that up, I believe, or I forgot the process, but so when prices go up, like basically, their cost's going to go up, which they pass it on to the consumers, I guess, right? I mean, that's how usually it works, right?
Well, it's a little more complex than supply and demand. I mean, we're getting into the summer months, so of course oil prices are going up, and as a matter of fact, they've hit $5 a gallon of gas in Manhattan Island already. So a little bit of it's price gouging, but as far as the oil extraction itself, for normal oil, it's the cost of the drilling and the pumping and the energy to run those pumps. And no matter how much oil is down there, if it takes a barrel of oil's energy to get a barrel of oil to the surface, the party's over. Nobody can make a profit on that. And that's why they were trying to push this whole fracking idea, figuring that there's shallow oil located either in fracking rock or tar sands, if they could just figure out an inexpensive way to get it out. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out very well. Fracking is not producing anywhere near the volume of gas and oil that was originally promised, and we've had all these ancillary problems like, methane bubbling through streams and lakes, killing off the fish. People in some of these areas can literally set fire to their tap water now, and earthquakes. All these fracking areas are having earthquakes in places with no previous seismic history.
And I wanted to stay on Canada for a minute, Mike. Trudeau, I don't know if you caught it is it the Parliament in Canada? Is that what they call that?
Yes.
Just like in Britain?
Yes.
Basically. Did you see they letting the ISIS guys come back in, just like in Europe. So we know they've been letting these people go fight, and then they come back into their countries. I'm wondering, Mike, how's this guy living? Who's paying his monthly universal basic income? That's what I want to know.
Well, obviously the Canadian people.
Because the gentleman from Canada, I forgot his name. He called in. He's like, gas prices are high up here a liter. I'm like, they find money for these people, like the refugees, but they just can't seem to help out the Canadian and their
well,
U.S.
We're seeing that here in the United States. The illegal immigrants are getting a better deal from the U.S. government than legal citizens. Anyway, Dustin, I got to let you go here. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Over at the American Center for Law and Justice, they are finally starting to get some of the emails between Hillary Clinton's State Department and the Clinton Foundation. And it took a lawsuit because everybody's stonewalling on this issue, but they've uncovered thousands of these emails in which, well, basically, it puts the lie to Hillary Clinton's claim that there was a firewall between the State Department and the Clinton Foundation, so that there was no pay-for-play going on. But these emails definitely prove there were favors being granted to Clinton Foundation donors. And they're still going through all of the emails, but so far they have found, let me look for the number here, basically 30,000 emails, and it just totally debunks the claim that there was a firewall between Clinton State Department and the Clinton Foundation. So they're just now getting these documents from the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. These are all supposed to be public records. But apparently there were just huge amounts of communication between the Foundation and the State Department. Cheryl Mills, Huma Abedin, and Doug Band. And Doug Band was sort of the liaison over at the Clinton Foundation for donors looking for favors and official acts from the Hillary Clinton State Department. So there it is. And we need to really see that this gets put out there. I guarantee you the corporate media is not going to cover this. So if there's one article off of my website that you should click the URL and email to everybody you know, that's the one right there. That's the one right there. turning to the economic news, there is still a lot of talk about the Federal Reserve hiking rates soon, but not just yet, to basically allow what they're calling an inflation overshoot. And a big question is, how symmetric is the Fed's reaction function to inflationary upside? How much will the Fed allow inflation to overshoot, and how much attention are they really paying to the collapsing yield curve? Now, Bloomberg noted that a key focal point of this issue will be to further distinguish the main threshold separating the 3 and 4 like camps in the 2018 dot plot. So we're getting into some of the jargon there. But the situation, again, the economy is overstressed. It is crippled with debt. And it's all because of that private central bank, which by design creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt, to entrap and enslave the citizens of a nation and eventually the nation itself. Every nation with a private central bank that loans the currency into circulation at interest is struggling right now. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to our show. We're talking about the economic news. It's hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Over at Wells Fargo in their municipal bond division, apparently things are not going well. And we know that municipal bonds are not performing very well because a lot of cities can't, repay it right now. They don't have the money. They're hovering at the edge of bankruptcy. And so Wells Fargo has been forced to dismiss several senior bankers. So that's another bad sign that the economy is not doing as well as the government and corporate media would like you to believe that it's doing. Very interesting study was done. This is reported over at Zero Hedge. And let me preface this by reminding you that yesterday I was saying that something like 43% of Americans don't have enough money to pay rent and food, and they're having to make choices. And according to this article, Americans are more likely to pay their cell phone bill rather than their car loan. And I guess they see the cell phone as more important, or it may be that it takes a long time from a default on a car loan to a repossession. And it's one of the reasons why Claire and I paid cash for our car that replaced the stolen Honda, because it's ours now, and no bank can come take it away when the economy implodes. Let's take a phone call from Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, we haven't heard Trump talk about the elections in 2020, presidential election again, because I assume he's going to run again. But my wife and I were talking the other day, and she mentioned something that was really interesting. And I thought, yeah, doing the math, we deplorables, which were about 50%, I guess, the whole country was divided on this last election. So doing the math of the deplorables, we've all abandoned the Trump train, and I know I have. So if you're looking at 50% of the population that was in support of Donald Trump is now down to maybe, let's say, 20% abort, take off. You got 30%. He can't win with 30%.
Nope.
In 2020. So I actually theorize the Republican parties, they don't like him anyway. They're not on the same page.
They never liked him.
I wouldn't be surprised in 2020 if they actually find another candidate and support that candidate, that Republican candidate, and Trump, well, either he bows out or he's going to get some really bad, dismal numbers. But I can't see him winning in 2020 when people who supported him, his own base is actually taking off and leaving him. Like I said, I'm gone. I'm off the train.
You're right. He isn't talking about it, and he may have just decided he's going to be a single-term president. But you're right. Unless the situation improves greatly for the American people, unless Trump starts keeping some of those promises that affect the entire nation, like draining the swamp, vaccine safety, honest elections, then Trump won't survive the primary season.
Right. That's it. One-term president. That's it.
Yep.
Hey, thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right. thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Raleigh in Minnesota. Aloha, Raleigh. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, we had such a good talk yesterday. I just wanted to correct something that I said yesterday before I dive into the topic. It's the Surgeon General that wears an admiral uniform, not Sessions, the Attorney General. But I was giving you a call about shootouts that have been happening on a frequent basis in South Africa involving South African gangsters. They've been attacking cash and transit vans, and there was one such heist that was done in Johannesburg Thursday morning at 9 a.m. involving a bunch of men that rolled out of a SUV and attacked one of these vehicles and actually blew up the van, with money all on fire. We don't know how much money has been stolen in totality, in number, but it looks a lot like the movie Heat, the 1995 movie with Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Val Kilmer. And it's happening on a monthly basis. I wrote an article and posted it on the Renegade Tribune this morning, but this phenomenon was new to me. But they do it on broad daylight, and they've actually blocked off a whole section of the suburb that they were in just to do this particular crime. And there was rumored that one of the police officers were involved in attacking the G4S security team that was actually carrying the money. And there was a person that captured the entire incident on a motorcycle. And then you got a woman that's inside of a building who talks really pleasant, that sort of English, Australian sort of accent, really fine, everybody calm down, it's going to be fine. And then she says, "Holy smokes," really loud, but she didn't say "holy smokes," when she heard the bomb go off.
I understand. Thank you for constraining your language.
Right. And I can't believe that this is the phenomenon going on in South Africa right now, where, you could get caught up in a gunfight between gangsters. Like, there was a dozen of them all together. And they actually got a police officer testify, that, what exactly happened and transpired. And they actually caught some of them. They got a helicopter to follow exactly their whereabouts for 5 of them, but 6 of them on the loose. And it's absolutely amazing. And it's something that happens like on a monthly basis in South Africa now.
Well, South Africa, unfortunately, looks to me like it's heading to be the next Zimbabwe. First of all, with the land grab away from the heritage white farmers, and again, these white farmers are being penalized for something they had no control over, because these farms have been in South Africa for several generations. And it is just as unjust to demand they turn over their land to the black people. What happened in the past is in the past, and again, they're going to wreck the place.
Absolutely, the police are playing cowboys, and the Mupakanaba are playing Indians, and that's what exactly it is. There's barely any rule of law in South Africa right now. It's basically being held together by a piece of duct tape. And it's not every single black tribe that hates white, but there are particular tribes, that are black in South Africa that feel that we should kill the golden white goose and take all of its eggs. And there's another group that are like, no, let's not kill the white goose. He lays these beautiful eggs for us and helps out our civilization. So I don't want to paint them all being in one, particular group. There's different, there's a divide among the tribes in South Africa about having Afrikaners inside of their country. They're not all blacks eating white babies. That's not exactly what's going on, but there is that dynamic of thugs and gangsters that see that they could actually just take away, Afrikaners hard assets and their money just right from them. Just take away their farms, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we
And
reported on that a little
ethnically
while ago.
cleansing.
Let's see. Okay, Raleigh, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're going to take a phone call from Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha.
Hey, there you go. I hate to disappoint Steve and you both severely. I really hate to disappoint you both, but it wasn't the people who voted Trumpy Poo into office. The reason why I say that is because the Electoral College is the what put him in office. Now, that being said, I mean, people can go through the polls and go through the whole process of who they voted for, the best actor in the whole scenario, shindig, if you want to call it that. At least I do, anyway. It's ultimately the Electoral College that put the various people in place. Now, whether or not Trumpy Poo did what the Electoral College wanted him to do, or some variation of that, or whatever have you, that's up to the Electoral College as to whether or not he serves again or not. Not the everyday people. I mean, people went out there and voted, yes, they wanted to, you know, get involved in that shenanigan, but ultimately, no. A lot of people have been deceived by that process for so long, it's not even nauseating to even think about. But I hate to disappoint you two fellas, but no, the everyday person did not put him in office.
Well,
so,
with the exception of the superdelegates, the Electoral College is made up of electors who basically are put in there by the voters. Now, the rules vary from state to state. In some cases, it's proportional. In some states, it's winner take all. But had the American people not voted in very large numbers for Donald Trump, the Electoral College would have gone the other way to Hillary. But that's the way the system works, and that's the way, you know, both campaigns were being run. And it was almost childish for Hillary Clinton to come on out after the election was over and start declaring that we should ignore the Electoral College. I won the popular vote, except that we know that a lot of illegal immigrants voted for her, and their votes really should not count. So she didn't win the popular vote either. Yeah,
well, even with that said, I'll grant you that, but even with that said, it's not to say that an organization like the Electoral College, just like any other organization there is in the political scene, is capable of creating a really great illusion that the people generally will fall for. So, again, I tend to stay out the side. I watch and observe what's being said or heard or whatever, and it's like I'm basically laughing my tail off at what I'm seeing and hearing and what people are saying and talking about, and it's like they either tickled, they either had their tickled fancy or whatever go on, or they're so PO'd that they're like, you know, like a piranha or whatever, you know, in the water.
Yes.
But it's like, please, people, pull yourself together. I mean, you've been played, you've been had, you took the bait, line, hook, and sinker. So you know, get with your life and stop it. So anyway, enough out of me. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. Ultimately, though, our election system does have to be fixed. We know that the electronic voting and counting machines are very easy to hack by the workers at the poll. If you go over to blackboxvoting.org, you can see a lot of material about that. There's a great documentary on the subject called Hacking Democracy that HBO put out a few years back that features Bev Harris, who's the woman who runs blackboxvoting.org. And you look at the software that she obtained from one of these voting machine companies, and you can just see it's been set up to allow somebody who has access to the physical machine to get in and change the results. Same thing applies to those counting centers. And at the very end of Hacking Democracy, they actually run a demonstration of how these electronic machines can be gamed from the outside with just the memory card. So that's one problem right there. The second problem is, of course, that the liberals have succeeded in overturning voter ID laws in many states, allowing illegal immigrants to vote. Out in California, illegal immigrants are being given driver's licenses and they're registered to vote at the same time, which is just absurd. They're not supposed to be allowed to vote. They shouldn't even be in the country. So then we have the the third problem in that the party apparatus is also corrupt. We saw that in 2016 with the Democrats successfully rigging their primaries to favor Hillary Clinton, and the Republicans unsuccessfully trying to rig their primaries against Donald Trump. So it is a mess, and it needs to be fixed. Now, as far as the Electoral College is concerned, there are arguments for and against it. Originally, the Electoral College existed at a time when horse and buggy was how you got around the country. And even though the country was a lot smaller, it could take a very long time for electors to reach the Electoral College. Back in those days, you didn't get the results of the election that same night. It could take weeks. And rather than just try and bundle up and carry all the ballots cast in a state, they said, we'll just have an elector, and whoever wins the election in the state, gets the electors. And the electors are apportioned according to population. And then they would all get together and cast their votes. Now, a lot of people say that the Electoral College exists to basically prevent the domination of elections by high population states, and basically that if the Electoral College was removed, you would have the candidates focusing all their attention on the big cities and basically just ignore the people in flyover country who would never get a chance to meet the candidates and express what their concerns about the country were. So there's arguments on both sides. Personally, I think with today's technology, we could have a direct participatory election system. In other words, decisions that are being left up to Congress, big decisions, could be put to a direct vote of the people, like whether we go to war or not. Anyway. So we were talking about how Americans are more likely to pay their cell phone bill over their car loans. And apparently, this finding is going to boost the demand for securities that are backed by cell phone purchases. And yes, I am not kidding you, there are cell phone-backed investment bundles coming to a Goldman Sachs retail branch near you. They learned absolutely nothing from mortgage bundling, student loan bundling. There are even bundles of home alarm contracts. So, Japan, Russia, and Turkey are starting to push back at Trump's tariffs, and they're basically over at the World Trade Organization talking about potential retaliation for tariffs on steel and aluminum. And they're talking about a total of around $3.5 billion in losses annually. Now, a lot of people are saying the tariffs are a good thing. It's going to stimulate American jobs. Basically, it's just another tax. The government is going to take that tariff money and they're going to spend it. We're not seeing Wall Street really start to invest in new manufacturing, and that's a problem. One with, as I reported earlier in the show, military implications. Now, when people talk about how slow the supposed economic recovery is going, we're often hearing this term, the global synchronous recovery. In other words, they're trying to bring all the countries' economies up at the same time and keep them balanced. But as it turns out, looking at the actual data, the economies of the United States, the European Union, are diverging, specifically France and Germany. When you look at the PMI data, they're hitting 18-month lows. So the global synchronous recovery isn't global, and it isn't synchronous. Now, as I mentioned before, gasoline prices are headed up. We're going into the summer travel season where people like to drive over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house. And it is predictable. Every summer, gasoline prices will go up because they figure the demand is up. People are going to say, all right, it's more expensive for the gas, but this is summer. We've got to go someplace here and there. Those of us on Oahu, we can't really drive all that far anyway. It's a small place. But at one gas station on Manhattan Island, gas is now selling for $5 a gallon. And with this Iran situation heating up, I expect it is going to get worse. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're still talking about the economic news. And a few days ago, Total basically pulled out of a multi-party Iranian oil project. They had a big chunk of it. They're walking away from that because of what everybody sees is a coming war against Iran. And now British Petroleum has become the second company to basically pull on out. And they have halted work on a gas field that it co-owns with National Iranian Oil Company in the North Sea, citing the U.S. plans to reimpose sanctions on the Islamic Republic. Now, Iran owns half of the Hroum field northeast of Aberdeen, and BP holds the other half, which it plans to sell to a U.S. or rather a British-listed producer, Serica Energy. So they're just getting on out while the getting is good. Britain is now expressing worries over Germany's reliance on Russian gas because of the possibility of a war interrupting that flow. And I'm wondering why this is coming from Great Britain. But again, it appears that somebody somewhere is considering a hot war with Russia. Or the more likely explanation is Britain wants Germany to buy gas from somebody other than Russia as another form of economic warfare. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Pete in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm really liking the idea of a direct democracy, holding plebiscites. The first argument people like to say is that's tyranny of the majority, and I would counter back and say that's tyranny of the minority that we have right now. I mean, yes. We have 545 telling 333 million people what to do, right?
Right. Yep, absolutely right.
There's something else I want to clarify. Yesterday on your show, you threw psychology and psychiatry under the bus, and yes. My undergrad is in psychology, and I think for the opinion that you made, you're right about cognitive psychology and how the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual version 5, has really turned the pharmaceutical industry into a bounty. But I came from the school of behavior analysis, and those two kind of philosophies kind of butt heads. So I think there is some legitimacy to psychology if you were leaning on my side of the fence with behavior analysis. When you think about a little ding when you leave your key in the ignition, that's all based on the behavior analysis. So just to clarify a little, I mean, you're not wrong in what you said, but calling them pseudosciences, I think,
that was a Supreme Court ruling that used the word pseudosciences.
Well, and those guys are all lawyers. I mean, how much should we believe them, right?
Well, it was an old decision back when the Supreme Court still had a sense of ethics and morality and legitimacy. But again, as I mentioned yesterday, I understand from the behavioral point of view, and I understand that just sometimes having somebody to talk to that is trusted can help deal with certain angsts. But the reality is when they're talking about mental illness and prescribing pills for it, it's all subjective. There's no machine that you can hook somebody up to and it lights up on this little screen, this person is a manic depressive.
Well, they came out with that, I forgot what the O stands for, that something defiance disorder, and you look at the acronym, it's odd. Well, he's odd. Well, let's give him pills. You know, I mean, that's how silly it's gotten. I agree.
Well, that article in Psychology Today really laid it on out that over the last apparently couple of decades, the profession, as it were, has sort of gotten into this idea of creating this theoretical ideal child. It was all decided by a committee. An ideal child will have these behavior traits, will feel strongly about this, not so strongly about that, and then started simply medicating all children who didn't fit into that ideal. But as Psychology Today pointed out, kids come in all shapes and sizes, and we're all unique individuals. And this attempt to drug children into being just these cookie-cutter copies of each other, yes, it made a lot of money, but was it good for the kids? And I think the answer there would be no.
I agree with you, sir. Have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Over in Italy, the Lega leader is telling France to mind its own business after France stuck their nose into Rome's internal economic affairs. French Economy Minister Bruno Le Maire called on the country's new Eurosceptic government to maintain its efforts to reduce its giant public debt in line with the European Union fiscal rules. And I think one of the reasons that the Eurosceptics are now in power in Italy is the Italian people is sick and tired of the European Union's fiscal rules and the predatory behavior of that European Central Bank. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials here, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go to the phones. Nathan in Northern California. Aloha, Nathan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to speak a little bit about Gaza and possibly, if I can, just a comment or two on Parkland.
Okay.
Maybe Texas as well. But to get to the point on Gaza, I have to go back to around 10 years old and talk about a story I overheard my father talking about when he was in Korea. He was a fighter pilot in World War II, got called back up for Korea, and he was on the carrier with the squadron, and they got called up to go on a mission. They had spotted 3,000 Chinese trying to get off this small island and get to the mainland. The mission was to just wipe them all out. But when they got there, he said it was like a mile-long snake, and they were marching single file, and they were stuck in the mud. And he said the key to a successful mission was to see how well you could fly these S-curves and shoot at the same time. And he said when they were coming in, they would bend over at the waist, and as they went over, they would pop up and try to shoot them. Well, anyway, the end result was that none of them made it off the island. None of them. It was a slaughter. It was a massacre. But I was 10 years old at the time, and it's like good guys and bad guys, cowboys and Indians. And I said to my father, boy, you must have gone back to the carrier, and everybody must have celebrated and been really happy about that one, huh? And he says, no. He said, nobody said a word. And I didn't understand this at the time, being 10 years old. But when I got into my 20s or 30s, it kind of dawned on me as to what happened. They were in a situation where, these guys were stuck in the mud. They couldn't get out of the way of the fire. And their guns were totally useless against Corsairs coming in at 400, 450 miles an hour. It was basically, like I said, a slaughter, a massacre. And it was probably a mission that all of the pilots wished that they had never, had to go on. And he also mentioned that if they'd have just waited till dark and the next low tide, all of them could have made it off the island. It was almost like he's rooting for the enemy. But to fast forward and get into Gaza, how do these hotshot Israeli F-16 pilots feel about bombing Gaza. And in this case, you're bombing innocent men, women, and children. And then you have the artillery guys outside of Gaza firing into it. And now you have the snipers killing innocent men, women, and children. How do they live with themselves? I just don't get it. I just think it's absolutely a terrible tragedy. I have heard that members of the IDF, they do commit suicide.
Yes.
But Israel covers it up.
Yes.
And we kind of cover it up around here, too. But anyway,
I remember seeing...
see what's happening in Gaza.
This was many years ago, but somebody actually did interviews with the IDF soldiers after one of the military incursions into Gaza, and most of them, were just kind of shrugging their shoulders. They weren't happy, but they're there to do a job. They're obeying their orders. But I imagine that as they get older, this stuff will come back to haunt them, because it's one thing when you are in a real war shooting at somebody who's trying to shoot you, and it is quite another to just be slaughtering innocent civilians. And the fact that Netanyahu says there's a state of war doesn't change the reality. The Gazans are unarmed. They've got rocks and slingshots at best. And Israel has the very latest modern weapons that U.S. tax dollars can buy.
Right. Well, I would imagine that there are some people out there that feel pretty bad about what they're having to do, and the whole thing is just a mess. And I'm pulling for the Palestinians. I hope there's better days ahead, but I'm not going to bank on it. One quick comment on. I know. Well, what I believe that Israel is doing is the same thing that we did to the American Indians. We have the settlers going west, and then we have Israel setting up not Israel, the United States would set up a cavalry post.
Yes.
They go west, more cavalry posts, and what they do in Israel, they move a double-wide mobile home onto a Palestinian's property, then they have an outpost, which is there to protect the encroachers, and the Palestinians get no help, but that's how, well, at least that's one of the methods that they use to steal the land, and I just think it's a terrible thing to do.
Well, Israel always talks about Eretz Israel, the Israel described in the Torah as reaching from the Nile to the Euphrates, and I personally think it's kind of ridiculous to shape a foreign policy around religion, but that's apparently a big part of the driving factor. God gave us this land; it's our land. It's our land, and God, in theory, gave the land to the Hebrews, but the majority of Israelis living in Israel today are not descended from the Hebrews. Most of them are descended from the Khazars.
Exactly. Well, I believe they're Eastern Europeans, and my great-grandmother and grandmother came over here from Hungary.
Yes.
And I got an old black and white photograph of my grandmother, and you can't tell the difference between her and Golda Meir's sister. I mean, it's like, my goodness, it's unbelievable. And her last name was Sandor, which means Anderson in Hungarian, but it also means from Israel. And so when my great-grandmother got over here, and grandfather, they didn't tell anybody that they might be Jewish, not even members of the family. So I don't know what kind of trouble they might have been in, but I don't think it was very good. She just married into the general population, and here I am.
Well, congratulations.
But yes, they are. I got a quarter in me, but I wholeheartedly agree with you that they are Eastern Europeans, and the whole thing is kind of ridiculous. Hello. But anyway, one quick comment on Parkland, if I can, that happened a few weeks ago. I was listening to Jim Fetzer after the school shooting, and he mentioned, where are all the video, cell phone videos, with 3,500 students? Where's the videos? And I kind of agreed. My observation was, don't they have PE in 7th period? I didn't see any kids in their gym clothes. I didn't see, nobody on the track, nobody playing baseball, basketball, tennis. And then I was listening to Debbie at Sane Progressive on YouTube, quite a popular channel for the Bernie Sanders people way back when. But she watched 4 hours of drone footage at Parkland.
Yes.
And she never saw more than 60 students. 60 students, 4 hours. And this gal, she's from our area back in New England. She's a graduate of UMass, 4.0 GPA, 14 years in the nursing business, and a very bright gal.
Mm-hmm.
So what I thought, out here in California, we have like early out Fridays, it's kind of teacher union stuff. So I looked at the school schedules, their calendars.
Yes.
And I found a whole bunch of school calendars have February 14th, Valentine's Day, early release day. Jefferson, Duval, Liberty, Calhoun, Okeechobee, St. Lucie, many others. Look them up. The students are dismissed at 1 o'clock. And so, the reason that you didn't, they were gone. And if you look up the bell schedule on Santa Fe High School, the bell schedule on Santa Fe High School says that first period is at 7:10 a.m., when in fact most schools start at 7:55. So anyway, there's a little skullduggery for you. I don't believe that these things are what they say they are, and that's what I had to say. So
yeah,
thank you very much.
I'm in agreement with you, and we're still getting more people coming forward from the Mandalay Bay shooting, saying that they saw gunfire from overhead helicopters, and there's one video that seems to support this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And
thank you.
All right, the phone lines are open again. Now, Israel, I guess there's just something about their policy of never showing regret or repentance or ever admitting that they have done something they probably should not have done. But apparently, Israel is very unhappy with the European Union over calls for a probe into what happened down there in Gaza and all the people who got killed and crippled. And Israel's energy minister, Yuval Steinitz, said the European Union could go to 1,000 hells. And he was giving an interview on a radio station where he made that statement. And obviously, the European Union is saying there does need to be an investigation. And so this energy minister says, EU can go to 1,000 hells. That prompted a reply from a top European Union official saying that Israel should not disparage Europe because Europe is a major buyer of Israeli products. And the entirety of Europe is Israel's biggest trade partner. And there was a very revealing comment in this article, which appeared out of Sputnik News. He says, "You don't understand that we are under immense public pressure against Israel. So the government is aware that ordinary people are just disgusted and appalled at Israel's behavior." And I imagine that's an issue here looking into the midterm elections as well. I'd like to see all the friends of Israel voted out of Congress. Just get them all out. Remember what Cynthia McKinney reported? She said that when she was first elected to Congress, she was asked to sign a loyalty oath to Israel. And she refused because her loyalty is to the United States of America. No government can serve two masters. Now, the European Union is starting to look at all the difficulty trading across the Atlantic with mostly the United States. They're now starting to pivot toward Russia. And European countries are looking at Russia as an ally in their confrontation with Washington over Donald Trump's tariff measures and sanctions against Moscow and Tehran. And in this context, German Chancellor Angela Merkel's visit has marked a potential thaw in EU-Russia relations. The EU is starting to say, we're big boys and big girls. We'll decide for ourselves from now on who our enemy is. It's another illustration that this belligerent policy of the United States is failing. It's just coming apart. Another article, this one came out of internationalman.com, The Long Death of America's Middle Class. And they're pointing out the middle class is in decline. And in 2015, what is defined as middle class dipped below 50% of the population for the first time since data collection started on the issue. The middle class is now officially a minority group. And nearly half of Americans don't have enough money to cover a surprise $400 expense. Many people are living paycheck to paycheck with little or no cushion. U.S. homes are less affordable than they've been in decades, possibly ever. This is not a working economy for the American people. Works great for the money junkies. It's not working for we, the American people. Now, the European Union is to start trade talks with Australia and New Zealand. So they're going to build up a trade situation there. They want to open up EU markets to Australia and New Zealand farm produce, such as butter and beef, and lots and lots of lamb chops, wool. Australia is a great wool exporter. Over in Germany, there's been a bit of a hiccup in the refugee program. Germany's Federal Office for Refugees and Migration is being forced to go back and review more than 25,000 asylum decisions after allegations of corruption at its regional office in the northern city of Bremen. Now, some of those granted asylum were considered by German authorities to be potential security risks. This is coming from Der Spiegel. They include Syrian intelligence operatives, human smugglers, hardcore criminals, as well as potential Islamic State terrorists. Now, the Federal Office for Refugees and Migration currently rejects almost all asylum requests from converts from Islam to Christianity. And he said they were undergoing belief tests that rely on Muslim translators who deliberately mistranslate at the expense of Christians or converts. So it's a mess there. Now, not too long ago, Starbucks got itself into a bit of a controversy when I think it was two men, wanted to use the men's room. They weren't paying customers, and they were basically asked to leave, and the liberals went ballistic, and Starbucks knuckled under and said that from now on, anybody can use their restrooms, and they will not turn the homeless away from simply sitting in the restaurants, even if they're not buying anything. And as can be expected, Starbucks is now turning into a homeless shelter, and it's basically turning off the paying customers. There's been a huge pushback saying it's, you know, the management is weak, the coffee is strong, and people are saying, they're not going to go there anymore. Starbucks went too far. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. I'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Over in Paris, things are getting really kind of ugly there. And there's protests going on against Macron over these social and economic reforms that he's put on in, that the French people do not like. And apparently there was a major clash between police and protesters in the Paris streets with water cannons and basically turned the neighborhood into chaos. And it's a shame to see any city, whether it's Paris or San Francisco, just deteriorate like this because of all of these not well thought out government policies. pandering to the bankers, pandering to the money junkies, pandering to the war machine. Over in Italy, their president has approved the Eurosceptic coalition's proposed choice for prime minister, Giuseppe Conte. And he is as Eurosceptic as anybody else there. So we're going to see a huge pushback against the EU by Italy in the very, very near future. No question about that. Now, as you know, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg had to testify before the European Union Parliament over data mining, dealing with meddling in elections, privacy, and so forth and so on. And apparently Guy Verhofstadt, say that 3 times fast, really lit into Zuckerberg for creating a digital monster that's destroying our democracies. Now, the European lawmakers at the end of it all were disappointed in Zuckerberg's testimony. Part of it was the format, where Zuckerberg did not have enough time to answer all their questions. And in that way, he was able to avoid the uncomfortable questions. The EU is asking for fuller answers in writing, but it looks like that whole thing is going to blow over and nothing will happen there. If you have a Windows 10 computer, and you have my deepest sympathies if you do not install the latest update. Apparently, the April update, I know it's a little late to get this out, but apparently it is just hosing the machines. After installing the update, the computer appears to boot, but then you get stuck with a black screen and no icons, and there's an error message that the desktop file could not be accessed. So apparently it's happening not to every Windows 10 machine, but enough where it's generated a buzz on social media. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. I'm probably going to have to take you to the station break, but what's on your mind?
Well, I was just doing a little research here. You know, in the news last week, there was something posted that Donald Trump was supposed to meet with governors to talk about the sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, and it completely, it's off the map now. I mean, I heard nothing about what they may have accomplished. I mean, it's really kind of simple. You follow federal law and you get resources, funding. But I never heard any more about it. Did you hear any more about this big meeting he had with governors?
And I think that would tell us that nothing was accomplished because, or maybe that something was accomplished against the open border policy and the media doesn't want to report it. But you're right, we've heard nothing about it whatsoever.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, Mike. Just want to see if you know anything.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. And we're going to take a break for station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And apparently, Mike in our control room may have been hit by that Windows 10 update issue. And he thought it was just his computer had gone bad just as he was installing the update. So, yeah. He says he might have been the beta test here. The FBI, which has been lobbying for ever more intrusive backdoor access to encrypted devices, has been claiming that encryption on personal electronic devices prevented it from legally searching the contents of nearly 7,800 devices in 2017. But today it's being reported that the actual number of devices they could not get into was actually much, much less. The FBI basically inflated the numbers to try and scare Congress into mandating backdoors into all of our devices. And I mean, we're seeing all this stuff about surveillance. It's just going crazy. Apparently, Amazon has come out with a facial recognition system that's now being used by the police. And it really is almost insulting. the government is just spending vast sums of money to spy on law-abiding American citizens, to be able to read their traffic, and the real criminals and the real terrorists can get around that. We showed that with that article, Rivero challenges the NSA. Anybody with a little programming skill can make a code system that the NSA couldn't break, certainly not in any meaningful amount of time. Okay. Over at the Pentagon, they're getting ready to fund a project which officials say will revolutionize the way companies, federal agencies, and the military itself verify that people are who they say they are. And it could be available in most commercial smartphones within 2 years. Now, they're going to embed this technology in the smartphones. And basically, what it is, the smartphone is using its motion sensors and everything to analyze your body motion and pick up identifiers that are unique to an individual, such as how much pressure your hand is giving, wrist tension, how you hold it, what angle, and so forth, and your gait while walking. And this system will then assign a risk score to the person holding that smartphone. And if that risk score is low, they'll be allowed to use that smartphone to access sensitive information. If the risk score is high, like maybe they broke their wrist at the softball game over the weekend, they'll be locked out. Now, the federal government is using Department of Transportation funds to spy on you. I wish they would use them on the roads because they are in bad shape. But basically what the Department of Homeland Security and Transportation Security Administration, they're building this massive intrusive surveillance network on the roads, rail lines, everything. There will be cameras everywhere. Currently, Britain holds the record for the most spied on people in the world, but I think the United States is about to overtake them. All of this is spending vast sums of money when our roads and rail systems are crumbling and in dire need of maintenance. We have homeless and hungry people in the streets, and the spending on all this tyrannical technology just continues unabated. Okay. So let's talk about our volcano. There's been another fairly large ash eruption from the crater of Kilauea, and the lava has already started encroaching on the property of the Puna geothermal plant. And it's burned a warehouse, and it almost seems like it's just only a matter of time before the geothermal plant itself is engulfed. They've capped off the plant is shut down. That's why one of the reasons why there's an electricity shortage on the Big Island right now, and why they're actually asking tourists not to go to the Big Island, because if the hotels are full, the electric demand goes up. Come to these other islands. We got lots of stuff to show you. But it's only a matter of time before it hits that geothermal plant. Now, the plant is shut down, and the pentane that everybody was worried about has been removed to a remote location out of the way of the lava. The actual geothermal wells, which were used to basically get the heat from deep underground to drive the turbines, to drive the generators, they've been capped off with heavy steel plate. But unfortunately, lava can melt the steel, and we could still see some explosive gases coming out of those pipes. Now, it won't be this gigantic explosion that swamps the entire island chain. Somebody's been running around trying to put that story on out. The only thing that would swamp all of the Hawaiian Islands would be if that southern flank of the Kilauea volcano plopped into the ocean. That would be a major, major problem for the entire state. And it did actually slip about 2 feet during that 6.9 quake. Okay, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Getting on back to the volcano, some of the lava is now pouring into the ocean. More and more of it. There are 4 different locations where the lava is pouring into the ocean. It's creating huge amounts of steam. That's not really the problem. in that cloud, there's these fine shards of glass. You have to remember, volcanic lava, it's vitrified rock. It's glass. In fact, if you ever come to Volcano National Park when it's a little quieter, and you walk around on the newer lava, there are these rainbow glints coming from it, from refraction within the surface of the glass. But it's being thrown up into the air, and I imagine at some point it will sinter out. But it's obviously a serious issue for everybody downwind, because now, in addition to having a breathing mask capable of dealing with sulfur dioxide, now they have to have eye protection. The rate of sulfur dioxide gas has tripled coming from the fissures, and Hawaii County is repeating warnings about air quality control. So it's still going on, and the hard part is just not knowing what's going to happen. Now, obviously, here on Oahu, Claire and I are not that concerned. For people on the Big Island, for people who are basically living in those rift areas, they don't know what's going to happen. The people up by the top of the volcano, Kilauea Crater, they don't know what's going to happen. And all we're getting from the volcanologists is, we're not sure. We think there's a big eruption coming. We think there is going to be a bigger earthquake as well, but nobody is really sure one way or the other. Okay, let's see. I could use a few phone calls to finish out the show today because I'm running out of talking points here. And again, we do not know. Now let's talk about what's going on over in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, because they have an Ebola outbreak there, which has now spread to urban areas, and the number of urban cases is going to rise. And the authorities there, and the World Health Organization is on the ground there, they're doing everything they can to try and contain the outbreak. And it's very, very difficult because the Congo does not actually have laws allowing them to forcefully hospitalize somebody who doesn't want to be in the hospital. And that has led to another problem, because 2 patients infected with Ebola left. They left the treatment center. One of them just walked out the door, checked himself out. The other one was helped out by his family members. Both of the men are now dead and were taken back to the hospital for safe disposal. But again, who knows how many people they came in contact with. Certainly the family members who helped that one man, they should be in isolation right now. From the numbers that are coming on out, this is one of the, shall we say, median Ebolas. There are several strains of Ebola, ranging from Ebola restin, which is absolutely harmless to human beings, to Ebola Mayinga, which is a slate wiper, 98% fatality rate. All right, let's take a phone call from Mateus in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Michael, did you say that you're behind in your talking points, or that you're welcoming calls because you're running out of talking points? I'm
welcoming calls because I'm running out of talking points.
Oh, okay, perfect. So that's when I like to bring up off-topic stuff. So I've got four things. One of them regarding community alert to the cell phones, like these emergency alerts.
I guess I'm wearing an appropriate T-shirt today for that subject. I have on my I Survived the Hawaii Ballistic Missile shirt.
Oh, but you did buy the shirt. Yes. You can't say that you survived it and did not buy the shirt, because you did. Okay, so the community alerts. Okay, I'm not buying it. They don't care about us that much. It takes a lot of effort and money to coordinate and to set up the infrastructure for this. And the real motivation is for mass public propaganda in the future. Like, I can see, I'm like slightly joking, but slightly serious here. In the near future, it's going to be more like citizens curfew now in effect, report to re-education,
Well, anything is possible. Technology can be good or bad depending upon who's using it. But if you think about it, it wasn't that difficult to set up because the cell phone infrastructure was already there. Basically, these emergency alerts are text messages. And the same thing with the cable TV system. Now they've got dedicated hardware to break into the video and do the splash line on the top. So it wasn't that difficult to get set up. And
they have to get permission from all the government bodies, the FCC, approval, infrastructure, sound wave rights, licensing, and then go through all the bureaucracies and then actually set it up and pay for it and find the funding. It takes some effort, and I don't buy that they're doing this because they love us. In Canada, they just turned off the radiation sensors in the water, so we can't know if there's any radiation from Fukushima coming. You know, Hillary Clinton stopped, when she was Secretary of State, stopped testing dairy products coming from Japan. So that's how much they love us. There's no way they're making this effort because they care about us. This, to me, is more about just
they want to keep the majority of us safe and alive because we're work animals.
Okay, well, next point, if I may.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't mean this to be a got you, so I'm not going to surprise you with it. Basically, I just wanted to present an opposing debate perspective on, you were talking before about how if God was real, God would have the ability to put the reality of God in the minds of men, and we wouldn't be arguing about it, we would just know the truth of it.
Yes.
So just for the fun of a debate, I want to defend God on this one, and I'm going to say, okay, if you had children, like, I'm assuming you wouldn't force atheism on them. You'd probably let them have freedom of thought and religion, and if they decided that they wanted to be Christian, you would let it happen. Is that correct?
If I'd been fortunate enough to have children, yes, I would have let them choose for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my point, is that, and I agree with you, that's what you should do, and I think you would be generous enough, magnanimous enough, and loving enough to allow that freedom. So if we are capable to be that generous, then if God were to exist, then God could also be that generous and give us freedom of thought and religion and not insert the God's preferred way into our mind. So I'm not saying that doesn't prove God exists or doesn't, but it kind of takes off the table that argument that I think if God exists, God is so unconditionally loving and respects our gift of free will that it's just letting us come to our own decisions about that.
Well, I disagree with that, taking it off the table, because the point I'm making isn't whether or not a God or gods is able to communicate with the minds of men, but that if that were happening, then all the world's religions would agree on major points like how many gods there are. And your opposing argument doesn't address that issue.
My argument is saying that God is respecting our right to choose by not inserting some reality into our head pre-manufactured.
I don't see that as a compelling
argument. In the same way that you wouldn't brainwash your child into any one religion. You would let your child have the freedom to...
Your theory is that God exists because he's invisible, which means, for all intents and purposes, he's not there. I mean, looking at the world today and what's going on, if there is a God up there, he's not doing a very good job. Wars everywhere, hunger everywhere. Now we've got Ebola breaking out in Africa, and I just don't see, any kind of divine hand in any of this. And basically, if you can't tell the difference between divine intervention and accident, then there's no divine intervention.
Yeah, it's complicated. Another thing is that if you took the world's most beautiful picture, say the most beautiful painting, and then beside it you had a blank canvas, and if the blank canvas represented like pure light and love, and the painting represented a mix of light and dark, which it is, then you would actually have to agree that the painting is more interesting than just the pure white. So the pure God, the pure white love of God, may actually see a deeper beauty in allowing darkness to be mixed in with the light. And plus, what happens when you cut up the light? You get the beautiful spectrum and all the colors. And
Matthias, you're not addressing my primary argument, that if there was a God able to communicate themselves to the minds of men, all the world's religions would agree on all the major talking points. And if you're saying there's a God who does not communicate with the minds of men, then where are all these priests and rabbis and pastors coming up with this stuff?
Well, they're just inventing it.
Exactly.
I'm not religious.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not religious at all. I don't buy this whole like this idea that we know the mind of God and that we are right and that you're wrong. I don't believe in this at all. I mean, from my perspective, it's just that God gave us free will, and that is a very there's a very heavy price tag to this free will. We're allowed to screw up. We're allowed to do wrong. We're allowed to be evil. We're allowed to be good. And it's only by having pure free will and letting us come to terms with what we're going to do with it that we can really have the experience of being made in the likeness and image, if that's true, of being a creator. Like, I'm creative. I compose music on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
If God were to tell me what songs to make, I would no longer be creative. So I think that my free will is being respected by not being influenced by the creator that gave me the free will so that I could be truly experiencing creativity. But
well,
anyways,
I
moving
disagree
on to
with
the
you,
second or
obviously.
third, or am I out of time?
Yeah, I disagree with you, obviously.
Okay, fair enough.
And
Okay.
again, I mean,
Back to reality.
Okay, back to reality.
Back to reality. A good way to get rid of Trump would be to encourage him to make unpopular decisions with his base. And I know this is not a new idea. I just wanted to just bring that up again, is that I'm pretty sure that one of the strategies is to try to get his close circle to trick him into doing things that are extremely unpopular. And I think it's working. I think that's part of what the problem is here, of why he's doing these things.
Well, he's turning out to be a very weak leader. He's turning out to be a very weak leader. He's too easily influenced by people with other agendas. He's apparently susceptible to flattery. And, you know, the only reason the deep state is still trying to get rid of Trump is they're afraid of all these investigations uncovering what they've uncovered. And apparently even Fox News just covered what came out today about Hillary's emails proving that there was pay for play over at the State Department. Because for everything else, Trump is giving all of these people what they want: more wars, more money. The only thing that he's done that is still angering people is he's trying to close that border. But he needs to bring back a voter ID law.
Yeah, when those last missiles were shot off, that was my line in the sand where I actually realized, okay, Trump's got to go. And so they won. His enemies won. They tricked him into doing things that even supporters like me, I was a strong supporter.
Okay, well, Mateus, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. I got more callers waiting on the line. Thank you very much for calling in, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we get back to the phone lines here, I do want to fit a couple more stories in here. President Trump has just gutted Planned Parenthood. Basically, he plans to cease Title X family funding to all clinics who provide abortions. And this is expected to yank $50 million away from Planned Parenthood. And, of course, the liberals are out there screaming a woman's right to an abortion. The problem is Planned Parenthood doesn't allow you to plan. They're in one business, and that's providing abortions. You know, girls who come in who are pregnant, who are thinking about carrying to term and possibly having adoption. No, they're actually encouraged. No, just go ahead and get an abortion. And then, of course, we know what they're doing with those aborted fetuses as well. I find it amazing that the liberals are supporting abortion of American babies, for the most part. At the same time, they're bringing in illegal immigrants and refugees across the border. Both liberal causes. All right, back to the phone lines here. Glenn in California, thank you for waiting. Aloha, what's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Just one brief trip back into La La Land before I get to my point. They can't even agree within the same religion. And, you know, there's something in the Bible that says that if the Holy Spirit puts something on their heart, that they have an obligation to tell somebody, or they're responsible for their soul. So your argument, I mean, just in and of itself is I mean, it stands on its own 2 feet. But that's not why I called.
Okay.
I think, you know, we've got this figured out. We know how corrupt things are, and it's just piling up so fast. I mean, it's going to implode, like you say. And it's really time to take your blueprint for the new America and really do something serious about it. Start a web page so that the oligarchs don't sweep in like they did in the Soviet Union when it collapsed. You know, if we have a good plan ready with solid thinkers like Cynthia McKinney, Ron Paul, you know, diversity too, like the founding fathers had, where they had the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and they were writing papers back and forth, different ideas. Lots of thought was going into this thing. And I think, you know, I mean, you had Ellen Brown on the show before, I think, and she knows Cynthia McKinney.
Yes.
You know Ryan Dawson.
Oh, yes.
You know,
Good
we
friend.
need to get this going. Yeah.
Well, I've been trying to work a little bit on Blueprint for the New America, and I've written a good deal of it. It needs a lot more work. Unfortunately, that takes a lot of time that I just don't have. I work on the website and the radio show. That takes up about 8 or 9 hours every day. Plus, I'm a roadie for Claire's 2 choirs, and doing that, managing that website, takes up more time. And of course, while Claire's back is healing, I'm doing all the housework as well. And I'm not trying to play for sympathy here or anything, but I want you to know I haven't just dropped the idea and dropped the project. It is out there on the hard drive, and at some point I do hope to complete it and you know, get it on out there. But it's time for people to start thinking.
It is. And, you know, I've got one idea that I think really needs to go into it, which is that, you know, if we do hold on to the original one, which I think we need to, at least up until the, you know, to the original Bill of Rights, is that Congress shall pass no law that abdicates its rights or responsibility, you know, that are ascribed to it by the Constitution to any other branch of the government or to a private entity. You know, this is a big problem. This is, you know, and that's just one thing I think is really important. Of course, we need to get rid of the 16th Amendment, and I think it would be good to have some sort of law if we keep the laws that we do have, you know, in structure, is that until we reach a sane level of legality, that for every law that they pass, they'd be required to repeal 2.
Well, you do that long enough, and eventually you have 0 laws. But the problem is that what the Congress has done is already unconstitutional. And I'm surprised that some public interest group isn't already taking this up to the Supreme Court, that Congress cannot simply give away a blank check for war to the president, that Congress has to decide each and every war. But this government, going back 100 years, has been acting outside the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They did it when they created the Federal Reserve, because the Constitution has to explicitly give the government a right or an authority for that to happen. And one thing that is not in the Constitution is the ability of the Congress to you know, turn the Treasury functions over to a private bank. That was pure corruption, plain and simple. And so you can design a really good government, and you can design one that tries to hold down the corruption and the abuse of power like Thomas Jefferson did. But ultimately, it's only as good or bad as the people who get into power. And unfortunately, we have a lot of bad people in power. Anyway, Glenn, got to let you go. Got another commercial break here, and we'll be back with more phone calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phones to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You know, I'm coming to the conclusion that we're living in the apocalyptic age, which is really, if you look at the Greek translation, it means revealing the secrets. And I think that Trump is an agent of this apocalypse time that we're living in, or epoch or era. I mean, you watch the news now, and you can just spot the Operation Mockingbird talking heads.
Yes.
I mean, can this be contained? I mean, as a 9/11 truther and Waco activist, and you know, the whole 20 years of scandal of the FBI, this is amazing. I mean, I'm just so, even though Trump's disappointed me in a lot of things, what we're seeing is so historic. Do you ever think you'd see the day when these people are on the ropes like this? I mean, any day now, one of them's going to pull the Samson option and say, if you're going to take me down, I'm taking the whole thing down with me. This is unbelievable. And I was just, I read an article once about that movie Being There, about, and Chauncey Gardner, and how what he was like a mirror, and people would just reflect through him of what they were. And every time I see somebody on TV like running down Trump, like Schumer or Comey, and if you listen to what they say, they're really telling you who they are.
Yes.
When they accuse Trump of something, it's them. It's unbelievable. It's so accurate, too. It's like for some reason, the apocalyptic spirit or something makes them reveal themselves to you. You just have to know the key to what to look for. It is just so amazing what we're living through right now. I just wanted to, and I'm so happy about it. I mean, I'm really upset with Trump about the Syria thing. I mean, I'm glad it was contained. I'm very happy about North Korea. Hopefully that works out. But this FBI stuff is just totally worth the price of admission. I'm just so, after what they did with 9/11. And I was listening to the previous caller talk about the Constitution and everything. I'm kind of beyond the Constitution. I mean, a constitutional country 9/11s don't happen in a constitutional country. I mean, to have the FBI, the CIA, the government pull that kind of stunt, it's like these guys that talk about auditing the Federal Reserve. Oh, audit them. Did they kill presidents? You come in with stealth helicopters and arrest them in the middle of the night. You can't audit people it's like you don't understand what you're up against.
Yes.
And this is what I'm hoping for with Trump. I've always said you got to give him 2 years to get his people in power. You got to get it, and with what's going on with the deep state now, the possibility of him being a true patriot, renegade, constitutionalist is still there. I've not given up on him.
Well,
Anyway,
if we see it come to pass, and I'd like to see it come to pass, I'd like to see Trump put on his presidential brass knuckles and start running the place the way he promised he was going to run it back on the campaign trail. And if he does, I'll be the first to apologize and say, I'm sorry I lost faith in you during the first 2 years. But we'll wait and see what happens. But you are absolutely correct. It looks like this cancer of corruption is breaking into view. We in the independent media, we have to keep those stories out there. The corporate media is still trying to protect Hillary Clinton because I think they understand if that whole mess with the Clinton Foundation and the email server and espionage and all of that starts coming on out, it could, in fact, bring the entire federal government crashing down. The American people just really, they have a point they won't cross over. And we don't know where that point is, but my gut is telling me we're getting close there. Some of the people I talk to in real life, they're actually starting to get angry when they talk about what's going on in this country. And that's a healthy sign, I think.
Do you think they can contain it without it going into the 9/11s and the Wacos and the Levon Finnegans and the Oklahoma Cities? That's what I'm looking for. I don't want it to just end with the Clintons. I want it to go into the Bushes and Obama and JFK we need a total house clean. And that's what I'm hoping for with the whole epileptic age. And that's my point, is that there's more going on here. To just watch, to witness it on TV, to watch these people expose themselves, to just know what to look for. And once you look and you see it, it's like the key to everything.
Yes.
They just expose themselves on the Senate floor for the world to see. It's kind of funny. The other thing I wanted to comment on was, I think it was 10 years ago, I was coming into Honolulu on a cruise ship when that earthquake hit.
Yes.
And I remember. I'm thinking back on that. It seems like, and now with all this stuff going on with that volcano, I'm just wondering if it was 9 years ago or 10 years ago. But
so you're talking about the Fukushima quake?
No, the quake. It was like 10 years ago in Honolulu, and because I was coming in, I was working for Pride of Aloha.
Yeah.
And we were coming in, and I thought we were going to crash astern because the ship started vibrating so much. But then we had like cameras in the engine room. I could see all the lights going out in Honolulu because it was like 6:30 in the morning or something. But I'm just it's just odd to me, 10 years later, all this stuff's getting ready to go, So.
Well,
wish you guys
actually,
the best
the
out there.
quake you're talking about actually took place on the Big Island, and for some reason, the power stations here on Oahu, they have quake alarms, and the quake was strong enough to trip them and shut down the electric grid. And a lot of people were very upset about that because the quake wasn't that strong here on Oahu, but who knows what they're going to do. But yeah, we keep an eye on the volcano. Anyway, Joe, yeah, it does feel to me, and again, going back to using the collapse of the Soviet Union as the model, after the Soviet government collapsed, then all the old deep, dark secrets started coming on out, and I think the same thing will happen here. We're one gigantic scandal away from the federal government being totally delegitimized. And when it comes down, then you're going to see all of this other stuff start to come out because the American people are going to want to know what's really been going on. And you've got independent media has been reporting on 9/11, the Vince Foster murder, COINTELPRO, all of this stuff. And there's going to be a hunger for this information in the American people.
Well, I'm hoping for guillotines myself, but we'll see. I want a French Revolution. I don't want just a quiet collapse. These people have to pay for what they've done. I mean, killing 3,000 people on 9/11 and starting wars, and I mean the only reckoning here is got to be. I just can't see a peaceful way out of this. I think that these people need to be arrested and put in Gitmo and put on trial and executed. I'm mad. I mean, to have to spend so much energy and money and time in my life, like trying to expose these crimes and the kind of crap I had to go through. I want justice. I mean, I want vengeance. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't want to see any kind of a civil war or revolution in the streets of America. I've made that clear many, many times. I'd just be happy if these people would just go. I talked about vengeance before.
I'm not saying revolution. I want the laws of treason trials. I want military tribunals if that's what's necessary.
All right. Well, you may get your wish.
Expunged from our history.
You may get your wish.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. But anyway, thanks for the call.
All right. Well, thank you for the call, and we're going to move over to Murr in Wisconsin. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
I just sent you 3 little emails here. After hearing Steve Elkins, I sent the one about the sanctuary state. That was on the 16th.
Yes.
That Trump had a roundtable. That was very good. I watched that. And the Mudstream media grabbed up the animal part about MS-13 gangs and applied that to immigrants in general. Mudstream media is not worth listening to. They need to go, and they're usury. But I also wanted to say that we are spirits first and foremost. Religion is a man-made construct or destruct, as the case may be.
Yes.
And you just heard that ad by Al Whitney about not trusting the priests of law and medicine.
Yes.
Well, in a call to her, it dawned on me. She said something about the church. I said, wait a minute. That's the most important priest you shouldn't trust. The ones that want to take your spirit. So all 3 priests. So that was the second email. And then I sent you one about Dr. Jennifer Daniels. She used to be on John Statmiller's show.
Yes.
Interpol is stalking her. They put her on known terrorist list now and closed her bank account.
Wow, that's pretty. That's pretty intense. I'm looking at it right now.
Yes, that we need to disseminate all you learn from me, make it common knowledge. See, then it's no secret. See, that's the thing. Because everything she says is just common sense suggestions. They're not, you don't have to do it. They're not doctor's orders. They're helping you care for yourself. And her show has 40 people in the chat room, 25 to 30 in her Facebook chat room, many more calling in and listening on the phone. So people are hungry for this knowledge. How can we take care of ourselves? Because we know we're not being treated right by these priests of medicine. And in fact, they're up to 1 million deaths per year iatrogenic now.
And, right now, medical mistakes are the leading cause, I think, 3rd leading cause of death in this country. Certainly way more than mass shootings. but nobody
I
talks
think
about
it's
that.
first cause. They're just not admitting to it. It's iatrogenic. That means, doctor and medical related deaths. But that's a standard of care. It causes death.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we've got a little bit of news
Listen to
here.
John Stadtmiller.
Say again?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. So now the FDA has issued a warning regarding teething medicines. These are gels that you put on the gums of babies when they're starting to teeth, ostensibly to numb them and make it a little less traumatic. And apparently they're concerned about the drug benzocaine, which can cause a rare but deadly side effect in children, especially those 2 years and younger. And the agency's been warning about the products for a decade, but said reports of illnesses and deaths have continued, and now it wants these products off of the market, noting there doesn't seem to be much evidence they actually work. So score one for the FDA. This time they've done good. And getting over to the land of Monsanto. Monsanto is still dealing with that labeling lawsuit that accuses Monsanto of misleading labeling on their Roundup weed killer by saying it only targets an enzyme in plants, but it's been found that glyphosate has a basically devastating effect on the gut biome, the friendly bacteria that we actually symbiotically live with in order to help digest our food. And it's causing all kinds of problems. So there was this disruption of the gut biome is associated with a host of 21st century diseases, including asthma, autism, bacterial vaginosis, cardiovascular disease, cancer, Crohn's disease, depression, inflammatory bowel disease, leaky gut syndrome, multiple sclerosis, obesity, type 1 and 2 diabetes, and Parkinson's. So I guess I wasn't far off the mark the other day when I said that a lot of these new diseases seem to be artifacts of these toxic products being put on out there. Now, Monsanto is facing another lawsuit, and anyway, the end of this story is that a judge has just greenlit the case to move forward. Monsanto tried to stop the lawsuit. They wanted the judge to dismiss it. He refused. It's moving forward. Monsanto is looking at another lawsuit, and basically it's claiming that Monsanto hid the cancer danger of their weed killer for decades. And the lawsuit was brought by a guy named Dwayne Johnson, not Dwayne Johnson, but Dwayne Johnson. He's 46 years old, and he's got cancer spread through most of his body. The doctors are saying he's just got months to live. And now Johnson is hoping he'll survive long enough to make Monsanto take the blame for his fate. So Johnson is going to be the first person to take to trial on allegations that Monsanto has spent decades hiding the cancer-causing dangers of its popular Roundup herbicide products. And his case just got a major boost. Last week, Judge Curtis Kamau issued an order clearing the way for jurors to consider not just scientific evidence related to what caused Johnson's cancer, but allegations that Monsanto suppressed evidence of the risks of its weed-killing products. Kamau ruled the trial will proceed, and a jury will be allowed to consider possible punitive damages, and that's where the big money comes on in. Now, I think it was on Monday we were talking about how children living in base housing on a military base were just coming down with all kinds of serious illnesses. And it turned out that the base had just had a very careless and reckless policy of dealing with their toxic waste, and they had just buried it in this field, and everybody forgot about it. And then this housing division of officers' quarters was built on top of it. And the kids are outside, they're playing in the dirt, they're playing in the mud like kids want to do. Now we're getting this story. This is up from the CBC. Former military police officer told CBC that he watched barrels of Agent Orange being buried at Gagetown Base in New Brunswick. He said he basically witnessed this. On the flatbed were over 40 full or semi-full barrels of various conditions. Some were solid, some were dented. various states of decay, a lot of rust, and all of them were wrapped with an orange stripe. And he said, at the time he didn't think much of it, but sometime later it hit home what he had really done. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Fred in Nova Scotia. And Fred, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break.
That's all right.
Okay, so what's on your mind?
I just wanted well, I've been listening to the callers, and a few things got me a little bit upset. For one, the guy was saying he didn't want a peaceful revolution; he wanted more of a violent revolution. Unless you've been through a war or seen war firsthand or seen death firsthand, I don't think you should ask. You should be hoping for anything in a violent way. I lived in Lebanon for 3 years. I lived in Lebanon for 3 years, and I've seen violence firsthand. The media in Lebanon doesn't sugarcoat at all. They showed me a father holding his I don't know if it was a son or a daughter, but the skull was removed from the body.
Oh, I've seen. Yeah,
skin was left.
I've seen that photo. Fred, I've got to put you on hold. We've got 3 minutes of commercials.
Yep.
Then we'll come right back to you and close out the show. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking with Fred in Nova Scotia. Before we get back to Fred, though, I just got a tip from the control room. Dr. Jennifer Daniels is coming on John's show at the end, so you want to stay tuned for that. And that's going to be very interesting. Anyway, Fred, I understand where you're coming from. You were in Lebanon. You got to see the horror for yourself. I've never been directly in war, but I know I don't want one here in this country. Now, I just got an angry email saying these people will kill to stay in power. There is no easy way like you want. Obviously, people are getting very angry, and I would urge caution. Remember, Gandhi got Britain out of India with only a moderate amount of violence. Yep. Anything else, Fred?
All right, good. Yeah, I just, for one, wanted, like I said, there was a few callers that said a few things that angered me.
Yes.
One is just to use a blank sheet of paper, white sheet of paper, and then a drawing, and to say that, religion as a clear blank piece of paper is not as interesting as a painting, and the darkness is more interesting than the light. I'm not the most religious Christian in the world. I am a Christian. I'm proud to say I am, but I'm not. I don't believe in going to church. I don't believe in the church as a group and stuff. But I mean, to each his own, right?
Yes.
And I respect you being an atheist and stuff. But there's some of us out there that are Christians, and some of us that are somewhat religious. And I think, when people make comments like that and make comments about like how, like the priests of this and the priests of that, well, the priests don't know any better. They're just doing whatever they want to do, right? And just to compare, to say that religion is just this blank piece of paper and it's this and this, and it's not as beautiful as the darkness, that sounds like you're, or he's, looking for the other side of the coin, more like rather than, the darkness is probably engulfed them.
Well,
I'm sorry to say,
he was trying to basically refute one of my arguments regarding the absence of a God, and failing, I might add. We're almost out of time here. Did you have one more thing that you wanted to say?
No, Mike, I really appreciate you calling. I probably have a lot of things, but nothing with this time frame.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Fred. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are closed, and I got a couple more stories to take the show out. Over in Missouri, they just passed a law defining meat to exclude plant-based and lab-grown substitutes. And this was obviously something that the beef lobby is happy about, and they basically think that a lot of these substitute products are misleading, and they want the labeling law changed, and they just got that now. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. Again, take what you learn here at the website and the radio show, share it with everybody that you know. Use email, direct face-to-face conversation. The social media platforms have become as useless as the corporate media. So take care of yourselves. We'll see you tomorrow, and aloha, America.